Hi guys, I'm Shabs from Syncro Gearboxes, and in this video we're going to take a look at fitting the Discovery Slickshift. The Discovery Slickshift will fit Discovery 1 and 2, so that's LT77 and R380 including TD5 with a short gear stick. Okay, so the first job is to take off this cover, and this cover basically just protects everything underneath it, and it's got the gator in it as well. But underneath here is the bias spring and the bias plate and everything. So we're just going to whip this out with these 3 bolts. Okay, so under here you can see we've got this bias plate here, which did belong there, but it's actually broken off, and that's a really common problem. We don't need that. Okay, so the first job is to whip these 4 bolts out. They're an 8mm thread with a 10mm head, and they bolt down the bias plate and the spring. Be careful, they will flick off like that, but they're not going to cause too much hassle. From factory, these will have been Loctited in, so they might put up a bit of a fight, but they will come eventually. So once we've got these 4 bolts out, we can bin both springs, the bias plate, both parts of it, or if it's complete, brilliant. They can all go in the bin. You can see here the bias plate's actually fractured and is no good for anything anymore. So we're just going to flick this rubber grommet out of the top of the gear stick. We want to hang on to this. Generally it doesn't wear, so we're going to keep hold of that one. It's good, just a bit grubby. So the next job now is just to pull the stick out, and that'll just lift straight up. There's nothing holding it in anymore. You can see this one's a bit rough as well. There's a lot of water on the top of this box. That's the plastic clip that we won't be needing. We'll put the stick to one side though, because we will use that again. And that rubber grommet, we're going to keep a hold of this as well. It's going to want a good clean up though. Same as the stick, we just want to check it for any really bad wear. Generally they don't. They might polish up a bit in places, but this one's good as well. So just going to really quickly clean up this mess, get the water out, get the grime and the old grease and everything out, and make it look a bit nicer. Going back, we're going to put it all back together again. I've greased up the stick as you saw, and this is the new clip that comes, or the new nylon cup that comes in the kit, and it just pushes over like that, locating on the 2 side pins. Again, I'm going to grease it up quite liberally, the more the better, inside the hole, literally everywhere. And that just drops straight in there. First we need to put in the little plastic spacer that comes in the kit as well, and that just lifts the stick up. So we're just going to pop that in there. It is quite a tight fit, but we don't want it coming out and we don't want it going anywhere inside the box. So I'm just going to push this down with this adapter just to locate it. It's not critical, but I just want to level it up, and when we bolt everything down, it's gonna be pulled down anyway. So just push that in there like that, and then obviously that'll drop straight in. If you look down into the gearbox, you can see that there's the ball shape that actually fits on the end, and which has a hole in it, and the gear stick needs to fit into that hole. So make sure we align that up, and it'll drop in. Gear stick will drop in just like that. And then obviously we've got that plastic, or that rubber rather, grommet that goes back on the top. So just give that another wipe. Dab of grease, and it just drops back over the stick into position where it was before, like that. In the kit obviously you get this fancy new bit that's part of the Slickshift, and that's basically the bottom of the bias plate now. The rubber grommet that I've just mentioned just sits in there like this, and then the aluminium base plate just goes back over the top like so. That's retained by the same 4 bolts, but you'll notice it's got another 2 holes. So I'm going to begin by Loctiting these 2 bolts and putting these in the front 2 holes. I'm using Loctite 270. It's a high strength Loctite, and it's ideal for this. It's what I use when I build the gearboxes as well. So I'm just winding these in, just literally a couple of turns, just so they're in the holes, locating, and then I'm moving onto the springs. You'll see there's 2 different springs. They are different. They're handed. One's longer than the other, and they are actually a different gauge of wire as well. Fitting them is a bit tricky, but it's not too bad when you know how. So firstly, you've got to start with the correct spring in the correct place. This is the thinner gauge spring, which goes on the left hand side of the stick. The thicker gauge goes on the right hand side. And you can see, if you put it into position how you think it would be a nightmare to get the bottom part round with the hook into position to put the bolt. So you're better off putting it like this, the wrong side of the gear stick, dropping the gear stick into third, and then actually spinning the bottom round into position and then dropping the bolt in. So again, I'm using the same bolts, double Loctite. So I'm just winding this bolt in just a touch, just to get in the threads basically. And I'm just going to wind it down with the ratchet a bit more, just so that the hook of the spring doesn't flick out when we're trying to move it into position. And now I'll actually be able to push the spring past the gear stick. It's a bit faffy, but it's not too bad. You can see there it just slips straight past the gear stick and then pushes down into position. Now if you look at the top of the spring, you can see it's not fully seated, so I'm going to need to push it down and then wind the bolt down, just so it pulls the spring into where it needs to be. I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to just jump onto the other side. And you can see I've put the spring the wrong side of the gear stick, but I can actually get the bolt in on the hook end. So just again a bit more Loctite, and I'll wind this in by hand, just give it a few threads, and then I can actually pull it past the gear stick and into position. It's not too difficult. I'm in third gear here, and you can see that the spring's actually ridden up the pin, so I'm just tapping it down, get it to seat. I'm not trying to hit this really hard and damage it or bend it, just to get it to go on. Now I can wind it down with the actual bolt. I'm going to go ahead and tighten all these up as well. Okay, so we're all tightened down, and now I've selected third gear. The next job is to fit the bias spring adjuster, which is this thing here, and it just sits in there. You've got 2 holes in the bias plate, and it's obvious how they sit like that. These are the 2 bolts. Dab of Loctite again, just to wind them in. Obviously the longer one goes in the middle and the shorter one goes towards me as I'm sat here. Just going to wind them in by hand again. The one closest to me, you can see I'm going to struggle to get it in when the spring is in position. The head of the bolt's just in the way, so I can't quite get it past, and I don't really want to force it. So I'm just going to flip this spring back up out of the way onto the gear stick itself up here, and that'll just give me a bit of room to get the head of this bolt past the spring and into position. Okay, so I'm just going to wind them down and into place, and then I'm just going to nip them up as well. Not super tight, just nipping it up. Flick the spring back down into position and where it sits, or where it should sit, like that. So I'm in third gear and I'll just knock it into neutral there. You could see knocking it back into third like that, I've just had to move the gear stick towards me. So I'm going to have to adjust the bias spring adjuster, which will move left and right. So I'm just going to undo the bolts that I've just done up ever so slightly, allowing them to slide. So I'll just undo them, nip them back up, and now I can move the gear stick into neutral and back into third. Just still got to move it over slightly there. So I'm going to unwind those bolts again, move the adjuster towards me or towards the driver in the car, which will just move the springs over and get that gate as best as I can. Just nip those up. Okay, you can see dropping it into neutral, fourth, neutral, third, and the gear stick's moving in a nice straight line. I'm not having to move it left or right. Pop the gear stick back on, just to try that. Third, fourth and neutral, all in a nice straight line. The gear stick's not having to be moved over towards first or to fifth just to get third. And once you've done it, it's just a case of tightening everything up, putting the gator back over the top and screwing down the cover for that, and putting your centre console back together, I guess. So thanks for watching. Thanks for purchasing the Slickshift as well. We're very grateful for that. And I'll see you in the next video.